they all say. That's right, I'ma do this thing my way. Let's go. Been grinding hard on it all day. Okay, we work hard, then we all play. Yeah, I'm addicted to
your background is, you were a Marine, you're a police officer before, SWAT team member, detective. So you're on the front lines. You're a active shooter, prevention expert, and I like that word prevention, which we're going to talk about a lot. And you also consult with companies, with the government, and at least try and make an attempt to get the government to take some action finally. So let's kind of dive in, because I wanted to talk about, it seems like there's active shooter incidents all the time. I'm not sure if statistically that's true, or we're just hearing more about it. So from your background, Chris, what are you seeing in terms of statistics? Are the active shooter incidents going up, or is it just that we have more access to what's happening?
What a great question. First, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you. But so I'm a retired police officer, and yes, former Marine, about 10 years. And, I was involved in an active shooter in real time in 2010. And then in 2012, I wrote my master's thesis on the phenomena of active shooters. So when that happened, Sandy Hook was about to occur, and I don't do school shootings. I can't try to make a living off the back of dead children, right? So I started looking at it from the phenomena of a broader range problem, if you will. And what I found, to answer this question, is it's in the eyes of the beholder. So when we see things that we allow into our central nervous system to observe or hear or sense or feel, then of course they're going to be more prevalent. But statistically speaking, we've been failing for 24 years, right? So we started at 3 in 1999, 2000, and 2022, we had 50. So that seems like, okay, that's a lot. Well, in 2021, we had 61. So we went down 11 from 2021 or 2021 to 2022. We reduced them by 11, but unfortunately the casualty rate was higher. So either does that, that begs the question, is that the shooters becoming more lethal, or our defenses are becoming more relaxed? Are there really more of these happening, or are they not? And I think what we have to ask ourselves is, what's fair? What is a fair assessment? And I think a fair assessment is, if we're having an active shooter a week, and that's different than a mass shooting or, gun violence or whatever you want to call it. If we're having an active shooter as defined by the FBI once a week, that's too much. And yes, I would say they're going up for 24 years as a solid line.
Yeah, so you mentioned you were actually involved in an active shooting incident. Is this when you were in the Marines, or I would imagine it's a different experience, but can you talk a little bit about your experience?
Sure. It was by definition an active shooter. I was on duty at the police department, and somebody came to our police department, and the differentiating factor is he showed up and started shooting at his terms. We didn't get dispatched to a call. We weren't responding to a call of somebody being hurt or the noise. We weren't responding to a SWAT call where it was predetermined and planned what we were going to do. In other words, this incident just occurred. And the person fired 168 rounds at our department. I would say he was firing at us, but he had a a semi-new rifle and a new scope, and didn't have the optics set up correctly. So what he was looking at was us, but the rifle was aimed at the top of the building. And 168 rounds later, he ended up deceased at his own hands. But 2 of our officers engaged from 141 yards away, and I wasn't engaged at all, other than coming around the corner to try and figure out where the shooter was. And just as I rounded the corner, I got the news that he was just, down. So my part of that was out. But it's a unique proposition when, say, you're eating a Fig Newton in a bottle of water and somebody starts shooting. So it really turned my attention to the phenomena of how these active shooters work, different than involved in a SWAT shooting, different than what I've been studying in 2007 and 2008 and 2009, Virginia Tech in 07, Fort Hood in 09, several in between there. And at our department, I was working on active shooter prevention but I didn't know what prevention was. I thought prevention was the faster we can respond, the more we can prevent. And that same mindset is in too many people's brain housing groups today, not by opinion, by fact. And if you just look at the numbers, Columbine happened in 1999. It took police officers 45 minutes to get inside because they waited for SWAT. And we say that's gross. You know, that how is that possible? So a little bit over $1.5 billion later, or whatever the number is, depends on who you listen to. 23 years go by and Uvalde happens. Took officers an hour and 17 minutes to get in. So with all that money and all that equipment, we should be much faster. We can never respond our way out of these events. And that, you know, if you follow me on any social media channel, you'll know, even on television, when in all the documentaries I've done, there's one thing I say, no matter what, it's always prevention over fear, and it's always preparedness over fear. You never want to be more scared than you are prepared. So just prepare yourself to get where you want to go. It'll all work out.
We know what the motives are, especially when it comes to the school shootings, you know, because in particular, that's the most disturbing, at least for, I think, a vast majority of us, especially those of us who are parents like myself. So, you know, what have we seen, and is the FBI or some other agency looking into what are the motives of these shooters, especially as it pertains to the school shootings?
I'm gonna pass on the motive, but I'm gonna use this opportunity to talk about the shooter's expectation, right? Different than what maybe the why, but the want. You know, these shooters historically, 75% of the time, tell somebody they're going to do something before they do it. And we as a country are stuck on this medium, if you will. It'll never happen here. And then it does. And then we're all surprised. And while, to even digress farther into your question about, are these more prevalent? Are they happening more? Should we be fearful or whatever? Let's take a look at what really kills people in the United States. Okay, fairly and accurately, not my feelings, just the way it is. Malpractice from doctors is the third leading cause of death in the United States. 251,000 people year over year die at the hands of doctors through malpractice. Not my statistic, just a fact. Now, the difference is most of those aren't, you know, homicidal. They're not on purpose. They're accidents, whatever you want to call it. It's tragic, though. And then, you know, that's only third to diabetes and cancer and heart disease, right? So then you drop down further and you say, okay, what's another leading cause? Distracted driving, 40,000 victims a year. So we say, okay, well, active shooters, how many victims a year? And it's kind of gross to count body count to determine what the fear and threat level is. Approximately 200 people a year get killed in active shooters, flat. So, you know, it used to be 135 and now it's somewhere, it vacillates. So we're just going to say grotesque, overly stated, 200 people a year die in the hands of active shooters. 251,000 people a year die at the hands of doctors. And yet you're going to run to the doctor if you have a cold. And rightfully so, because chances are they're going to help treat you. I said all that to say this. When you're sick, you go to the doctor, you tell them what's wrong. They, you know, cause, cure, control, progress, right? And it's usually a prescription or surgical procedure or whatever. And they make you better. Active shooters, 75% of the time, tell someone, your neighbor, my neighbor, our family, I'm going to be an active shooter. And we don't believe them, or we don't report it, or we don't know where to report it to. And we're letting these people just bake. And the number one thing, to answer your question directly, which I'm trying to shy from, a grievance. You want people to reduce this to mental health. You're discounting the real problem, right? We all have mental health problems depending on what it is. A good day, a bad day, too much coffee, not enough coffee, drug problems, prison problems, marital problems, cash problems, societal, whatever. These people just feel aggrieved, and then they have these ideas and tendencies that you and I can't understand. And all of a sudden, they go and do these grotesque things. And then, yes, you and I will say, or I'll not speak for you, but I'll say, oh my gosh, that person was crazy. And you say, well, of course. But then we find out only 25% of active shooters have a diagnosed personality disorder or have been diagnosed crazy, mentally unstable, whatever term you want to use. That's kind, because I'm not trying to be rude. But the problem with that statement is diagnosed. You have to see a doctor to get a diagnosis. And anyone that would go in and shoot a room full of kids, well, is that normal? No. And can we reduce it to a word that we can all put our finger on? Yes. And that's where we come up with, that was crazy. So we have to really be cautious about what was this person's motive or what was that person's motive, because the next motive may be different than the last. It may be, and I'll give you a couple top line shootings without naming them. And I'll tell you about the killers. Sexually molested by a family member, went unheard, went unsaid, went untold. And then they told everybody, I'm going to get back at everybody. No one believed them. Another one, there's something called an incel, which is, sexually frustrated person. It's much deeper than that, but for the topic of this conversation, it's sexually frustrated person. So how do you say that's true, Chris? Okay, well, if you're confused about your sexuality and you're getting made fun of and beat up and you want to date, but you don't know who, and all of a sudden you start getting bullied, well, look how powerful you are now by killing those people. And that's what some of these people are doing, or getting directly to the other sexual orientation. In the last 25 years, we've had exactly 4 women shooters, female, 4. In the last 12 months, we've had 3 transgenders. Does that make it more likely or less likely that a transgender is going to be a shooter over a man or a woman? I don't know. There's not enough data. But what I am saying is there's a direct correlation to sexual frustration in all 3 of those shootings. And one of them, they refused to release the manifesto to tell you that very item right there. And I'm going to say, in my belief, just to cover myself from libelous and slander, but, a very good educated in my belief, right? They had sexual frustration, and that's in the manifesto, and that's not good for the narrative right now. So you have to look at the totality of the circumstances and drill down to it. Because if I tell you, oh, it's all people that use this product, and then somebody else shows up and does a shooting, but that doesn't fit the pattern, you can get away with saying, well, it's a one-off, but you can't get away with saying, well, I didn't think about that. So these shooters, there's no profile of an active shooter on purpose, right? The FBI doesn't have one. There's not something that fits. We reduce this to, again, we always reduce things, right, to make it palatable for the public. White males or angry males or former military or whatever, they do studies all the time. The problem with those studies is they don't study only active shooters. They're studying gross issues and including suicidal tendencies and suicides, and those numbers get skewed, right? We know 22 veterans kill themselves every day, and a lot of law enforcement every day. We have to extract those numbers and look at people that wish to do harm on others, not just on themselves. And once you do that, you see that, I could name 10 shootings that have every race. Race doesn't really have anything to do with evil. Evil is evil. So I want to give you a really good explanation of why I'm dodging your specific question. And I think I hit that pretty broad.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. So here in the United States, okay, what is the agency or agencies that are responsible for active shooter prevention, if any, and then active shooter response? So, which is it, the FBI? Is it, other agencies? So what are their roles? Which agency, what are their roles, and what exactly are they doing or not doing?
It's a great question. So I think if you were to ask them, they wouldn't know. And that's a fair statement. So if you would hang a sign on your wall that says, okay, national standard, police, we talked about, we can't respond our way out of this, and yet we spend a lot of money on response. And after Sandy Hook, we came up with a national policy for a national standard of alert. Police will do these things. They will run to the shooter, stop the shooter, arrest, detain, or destroy, or stop, neutralize the shooter. But we forgot the public. Okay, so here's some important numbers for you. Historically, active shooter incidents happen at 0 minutes and end at 8. Now, it's not a direct line. This is a statistical average, right? Because I can tell you active shooters that ended before 0 because they were interdicted, or active shooters that lasted much longer than 8 minutes. So we're just going to go with a historical perspective from a statistical point of view. 25 years of data, 0 to 8 minutes. And that's being kind on the 8 minutes. It should be closer to 12. But for, sake of this argument, we're going to say 0 minutes they start, 8 minutes they end. It takes police 8 minutes to get there. What's most of that delay? Notifying the police. So you say, well, who's responsible, Chris? Okay. The Secret Service tracks active shooters from schools and mass killers at schools. The FBI has a program office for active shooter. That's what it's called, right? Fill in the blank. There's no silence problem. It's active shooter. Well, I say active shooter prevention. If we don't start getting left of bang, me and you are going to have another webcast in another year and talk about the other shootings. And I've said that for years. And sure enough, here we are, not maybe with you, but my last interview with the BBC before the one, 10 interviews before the last one. If we don't do something about this, we're going to be back here again. And since then, I've been back 9 more times. I don't even like TV anymore. I don't do interviews that much anymore. I'm really fickle about it because too many people want to exploit the tragedies instead of the solutions. And I would try. That's why I'm here. I trust you to understand there is so much more to this than Chris Grollnek's opinion. This has to be all hands on deck. Come fight me, call me out, email me, tell me what's wrong with my plan. And if I agree with you, or you can show me, I'll fix it, because that happens. And when I came up with the new pro model, the prevention, response, and options, and I got to go to the Department of Justice in 2022 and present this, and they filmed a video on it. Before I did that, I went to some really good friends that retired from the FBI hostage rescue team and said, hey, does this work? And, they hurt my feelings pretty quick. Pow, didn't work. We defeated you. I'm like, oh boy. So back to the drawing board, right? Come back. And now I'm at 7 minutes and they're like, wow, you got 7 minutes on us. I said, help me make this better. And then we did. We created this prevention, response, and options. And it's like a total wheel. And I call it the painful onion because it's like anything else. If it's not layered, it doesn't work. If you don't have redundancy, you're guaranteeing failure somewhere. So who's responsible? I don't know that anybody's responsible. And while they have programs out there, Alert, Texas State, CRACE, which is a civilian response to active shooter education, from the Texas Alert Center, Texas Alert is what they used at Uvalde. Didn't work out too good. And I can name several others that it didn't work. Now, fairly and accurately, alerts worked great in other circumstances. But again, if you don't have a redundant system, you're guaranteeing failure, and we've seen way too many failures. So who's responsible? It's hard to say, and who am I to be responsible? And here I am at the plate saying, bring it, let's go. Oh, because my mission in life is literally, you'll have a police officer watch this and they'll email me or text me or call me and tell me how wrong I am. And I appreciate that. But I ask that same person that's skeptical, okay, with what you know right now about active shooters and what you go teach as a police officer right now to the communities, would you teach that to your family? Or better yet, have your partner go to your family and teach it, put them in the middle of an active shooter and expect them to survive, yes or no? And the answer is 100% of the time, no. I mean, you might have the one person that just wants to be ornery and say, of course I do. The reality is, I'm not sure what's wrong with that person, but okay, I'll take the 99%. 99 out of 100 people are going to say no. So what do? We start empowering these people to go home with kitchen table topics and say, here are solutions. Here's the easy ones all the way to the hard ones. Here's the free ones all the way to the ones that cost a lot of money. And I'm going to tell you right up front, I don't sell anything. I only speak. I'm a public speaker. That's it. I used to be into assessments and training and sales and products. And, you kind of get lost in the business. And I built this into be a business of the human model. Like, we need to help humans. I don't care about business anymore. I'm retired. I want to stay retired. I only speak here and there, by request. And while there's a lot of requests I don't take, you know, I recovered from cancer. I need to value my time and, twice. But, I want to live my life, and I'm, older than I look, but I want to just take the time and give back and say, you know what, I got a longer lease on life. What can I do to help? And this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Congratulations on beating
Thank
cancer
you.
twice. Yeah. I want to go deep into the solutions, because I think that's extremely important. Prevention is extremely important. So is response to active shooting incidents, but prevention. Before we do that, I want you to speak, if you can, Chris, to what are soft targets and what are hard targets? What does that mean? And then for bad guys, do they deliberately look for soft targets or hard targets when they want to, act out?
I think the easiest way to look at this is, a 7-Eleven and a bank. 7-Eleven, the front door's open, very little measures, no counter space in between you and there's just counter space in between you and the salesperson, no ballistic shields. But you go to a bank, again, maybe a little bit soft up front, but you're not getting in the vault if it shuts. The vault is the hard target. The cash register is the soft target. And to get really personal about it, a lot of schools are soft targets because they don't lock doors well. They don't do training. They suffer from the mindset of what I opened with you. That will never happen here. It will, so one of my opening lines in my speeches, welcome to It'll Never Happen Here, until it does. So when we change the mindset, we can harden those targets by actually making them more open and inviting. And I'm not going to jump ahead of you, but I do want to tell you this. It's been 68 years since 10 or more kids got killed in a school fire, right? And there's some debate how long it's been since a child died in a school fire. So we'll just go with the 10. Why do you think, and there were horrible school fires, why do you think kids stopped dying in school fires at that number? Because we as society got done killing kids in school fires. And we started putting in alarms and smoke detectors and fire prevention shields and fire panels and self-actuation fire sprinklers. Okay, well, we've had a lot of school shootings. Isn't it time we start talking about solutions for those? And people say, well, I don't want my child to go to school in a prison. And I agree. I think the solutions that we came up with they actually make the campus more open and inviting than they do lockdown. And you have an easier target than a softer target. I'll give you a great example. Do you know off the top of your head what the number one target is in the world to commit a terrorist attack on? The White House, right? And yet the front door is unlocked and you can take a tour. So maybe not today because there's so much crazy political drama going on, but in essence, it's not just because the Secret Service has that much money. It's because the layered onion system that they've employed, you're just not going to do a nefarious act there because there's so many levels of deterrence that they're going to catch you and stop you before you're able to act out. Make sense? Yeah. I mean,
It does. It does. Yeah. And that's, I think, really important information. So for people to understand what you said, Chris, as a soft target is essentially a location where a bad guy, let's say, can easily infiltrate and cause harm to people. A hard target would be the opposite. Is that right?
Fair enough. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. I should have spoke directly, but I try to make them in broad terms, metaphoric. So
No, great information. Yeah, no. What you said is really important because I want people to understand that when I'm taking my kids to an elementary school, which I do every day, as a dad right now, doors can potentially be open. If they're locked, I could follow someone in, right, without my ID being checked, without me going through a metal detector, without any security guard standing outside, without any police vehicle outside to deter any bad guys. And it's disturbing. I see every day when there's these active shooting incidents, there are people like yourself who are experts that are providing solutions. I know of multiple Navy SEALs who have provided blueprints and solutions, actually have submitted them to politicians, to the police departments, to schools. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands of veterans who are highly trained, who have volunteered to stand guard at these schools and other places. And it seems like all of these offerings, all of these potential solutions are just falling on deaf ears. So is that what you're seeing? And just in terms of what's being offered as solutions to the so-called decision makers, and what's happening on that end. And then after that, let's talk about what are the actual solutions.
Okay. So that's a little bit of a tough one. And I am not politically correct, so don't think I'm trying to weasel into something. I want to tell you, when I started studying this, I'm probably going to be like the average viewer. Forget technology. A good guy with the gun is going to stop a bad guy with the gun. Okay, cool. And then you watch Uvalde, you're like, it's a one-off. 376 police officers on site for an hour and 17 minutes. Okay. So you say, okay, a one-off. Well, if I were to pull up on my share screen here, which I'm not going to do, I would show you a slide from a presentation that shows you the last 8 grotesque active shooter incidents at schools. Mass murders. Teachers and police were on site and armed. Never drew their weapon. Never even drew it. So if I have 8 mass murders plus Uvalde, and you have all those people, good guys with guns, that aren't stopping bad guys with guns, this is important to state. I am in no way saying take guns and people out of schools. I'm not, and I'm for sure not saying armed teachers. What I am saying is you have to have a balance and realistic expectations. So, these are easy, this is a softball question, well, the SEALs go and they give a solution. They're fantastic solutions. The problem is it's desire versus ability. Okay. So, how long you been married? Are you not to get too personal, but you've been married a long time, more than 5 years?
15 years.
15. So your wife comes to you tomorrow and she says, you know what? I want to be an inside linebacker in the NFL. She has the desire. Going to be a great linebacker. And you being married 15 years, you know how to exactly lie and say, baby, you're going to be the best inside linebacker there is, right? Respectfully. And she says, okay, well, what do we do? And you say, well, I'm going to get you the best equipment there is. The best. We're going to go to Dick's Sporting Goods tonight, buy you a really nice shiny helmet. And metaphorically speaking, that's my new SWAT helmet. And we're going to buy her some shoulder pads. I'm going to get a new ballistic vest. She's going to get a new football. I'm going to get a new rifle. She's going to get weight training. I'm going to get a faster car. So you see the parallel, right? We're arming the police and citizens with all this great stuff. And I've armed her with all the great stuff to play football. And she's well armed because you have been watching football every Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, teaching her the rules for 15 years. She can play. And they blow the whistle in the first play. What happens to her? Pow. Mowed right over. What went wrong? She had the desire, but not the ability. And frankly speaking, and this is going to hurt some feelings, a lot of people want to be Navy SEALs out there. I'm not one, right? Don't think I'm saying I'm one. I'm not. Probably the hardest thing there is to do. Good for them. But that doesn't mean you want Navy SEALs in all the schools. All the veterans. Absolutely, yes. Great opportunity. But you have to add to it. It can't, because not all the that's like all people that wear red shirts and do podcasts. You can't trust them. They eat Burger King. Well, I mean, you've probably never eaten Burger King your whole life or whatever. The moral of the story is we are all human beings and we don't rise to our expectations. We devolve to our level of training. And if you don't have the appropriate training and you don't have the appropriate factors in place, you're not going to be able to do what's expected of you. So what do we do to fix that? We look at the problem and we find a solution that's real and palatable to saying, okay, Mom, Pa Kettle, you're going to drop your child off and it's not Fort Knox and you don't have an armed SWAT guy out front the door. Do you need one? Maybe. Maybe a sign is what you need. Maybe ballistic glass is what you need. Maybe you need to call Clear Armor, and this isn't a plug for them. It's the film that works, right? Dave in Chicago or in Illinois has this film like other companies do But other companies, I've seen the bullets go through the film. No bullets go through Dave's film. There's a reason the government uses it. I mean, there's so many options out there. What do you want? Do you want a armed guard out there that looks like a SWAT member greeting your 4-year-old going into kindergarten? Or do you want something that's transparent that you see through that stops bullets that your 4-year-old can stand behind and be totally safe? Again, mix. You want to mix. You want to know that there's armed people on school, but you don't know who they are. You want the clear armor, true armor glass on top of there, or clear armor glass on there, the laminate, and it's a safety zone. Again, the painful onion, man. It's the layer effect. We're layering this. So do you have veterans at every school? What a great idea. Put them to work. Have them in that mindset of taking care of kids and have more than one. You can't say we don't have the money. We're in debt already. Difference does it make? We're sending money to other places, and I'm not going to get in a political debate with you. I'm simply going to say, if we're funding other countries and we're about to fund Taiwan, we can fund the schools. What do you fund them with? A whole host of solutions. But before I tell you what they are, I'll answer this other question for you. Are people listening? And the answer is yes. But we have to be realistic to what they're listening to. Cancer, diabetes, obesity, medical malpractice, insurance companies, technology partners, internet, having immunity. You go type on the internet right now, Stoneman Douglas killer films message, and you'll watch a 2-minute video of the killer from Stoneman Douglas telling you that he's going to Stoneman Douglas in 2018 to go kill people. And he tells you how many he wants to kill, where he's going, the day he's going to do it, the weapon he's going to use, everything. And the video's still there. Why? Because we as a society have let it be there. Why? Because we haven't spoken up about it. And I can tell you a few more, but just briefly too. Tops grocery store in Buffalo, New York, and the bank in Louisville in 2023. Both live streamed, Instagram, Facebook. Both videos exist. They're over a minute long. They're still on the internet. Why aren't they down? And I'm not a Big Brother type person saying, oh, we need to be Big Brother. What I am saying is there's technology available to stop me from emailing you or social media posting you about my new COVID virus. And it comes back and says, go to the CDC. But there's not to say Chris is shooting at the bank in Louisville. That makes no sense at all. So until people understand the depth of the problem, we can't really focus on it. Because what do you end up with? A polarized debate and a binary option. Guns, no guns. More guns, less guns. More guards, less guards. More police, less police. You'll never win those arguments because those aren't the solutions. They're part of it, but here's the biggest thing. If any viewer wants something to take away and put in their pocket, here it is. There's no magic pill. This is a painful thing, and it is a layered process. It does cost money. There's a lot to do. So food for thought.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important, and there's so much there what you just talked about. The law enforcement agencies, from my perspective, and from what other people are seeing that actually have their ear on the ground, the law enforcement agencies have been failing U.S. citizens for years. Some people say deliberately so, and they're ignoring important things like saving children in schools and focusing on other things that are not as important. Like you mentioned, when it comes to people involuntarily being forced to inject things into their bodies, and they're able to record and report that and track that down to the T. But then you have people for years who have a video up saying, I'm going to do this and that, and then they fail to track. So, it's fascinating when you actually see these things from a third-party perspective, and you see exactly what the authorities are focusing on versus what they ignore, also versus what they enable. And then they use that in conjunction with the mainstream media in order to actually enable this some more. So there's a lot of prevention. I think what people need to understand, and it's too short of a time to go over this in detail and provide examples. Maybe you and I could do that in the future, perhaps. But it's very important for people to realize that a lot of this stuff we're talking about and a lot of the problems in general can be prevented here in the United States. including all the health issues and stuff you mentioned. But the powers that be either don't want to, or don't have the desire to, or are instructed not to. That might be a different discussion, but it's related to this because from my perspective, especially as an entrepreneur, I care about solutions. And a vast majority of problems on planet Earth, from what I'm seeing over my years and years of being alive, is that a lot of these things are preventable, especially when you have 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds going to school. And you have teachers there who their job is to protect their students, right? We have law enforcement on the local level that are there to respond to things, which is a response, and that's great, and they do a good job. But then we have other agencies and authorities and departments that are there for prevention. They actually were created to track bad guys and prevent loss of life. And it seems like they're not doing the job that they were created to do. And it seems like a vast majority of these agencies are now political agencies. And US citizens more and more, and these are former police officers, these are, former SWAT team members, members of the military, former members of the military, some of the non-corrupt politicians. They're calling for the FBI, NSA, CIA, all these other agencies that appear to be massively corrupted, that are all political now, instead of looking out for the best interests of US citizens, to actually be disbanded, right, and reworked, restructured in some way. So all of this relates to, from my perspective, what I'm seeing, direct deaths of the 5-year-olds at Uvalde, at all these other school shootings, right? I mean, you have tens of thousands of volunteers that will stand in front of these entry points of schools, and they're being denied access. So number one, you can put them to work, like you mentioned, Chris, which is a great idea, right? So veterans, they're having their own struggles, right? 22 a day, for what we understand, are killing themselves. They're having financial problems, mental health problems, all sorts of issues. So that might provide a solution to that problem as well. Let's put them to work. Let's do something that they love to do, which is protect the United States, right? Also, let's compensate them because they need money and it's a job that they're looking for. That might solve their financial issues. It also solves a problem of, right, how do we get bodies in front of adults in front of these schools so we could possibly prevent death of these 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. So I think there's massive solutions, and I think there's unlimited amount of solutions, like you're saying. I look forward to hearing yours in a minute, of what we can do just from a logistical perspective. Like I have my kids going to camp right now, separate from the school. Every day when they drop them off from camp, before we enter the parking lot with the vehicle, there is a marked police vehicle there, an SUV, and we have to have a certain pass on the dashboard of the vehicle, and we either get waved through or we don't get waved through, right? And I absolutely love seeing that police vehicle every morning. I look for the police vehicle.
Great deterrence.
It's a massive deterrent, right? So I'm looking at that when I go to pick my kids up at the end of the day. I'm looking for that same vehicle. Sure enough, it's there. I absolutely love seeing that. Sometimes there's two vehicles. When I actually enter the office to say my kid's name to pick them up, there's a police officer behind the desk. I absolutely love seeing that. That to me is a no-brainer. And I asked, I said, why are you here every day? You get paid? And the police officer was telling me that they have a sign-up sheet and they volunteer to be at this location. And their superior says, I want you guys to volunteer at these different locations. Please sign up. So they're being pushed to sign up to these locations that may be so-called soft targets, or targets for individuals with who want to harm children, right? So if I had a choice of putting a police officer at a school or a bank, I would put them, if I was local law enforcement, I would say, Mr. Police Officer or Miss Police Officer, please go to the school. The bank, which is Bank of America that I go to, they also have armed guards, but guess what? They pay for theirs. Okay, they don't need a local police officer there. They have a guy dressed up every time I go in his uniform, all black. he has a sidearm, he has whatever else, weapons may be on him, and he's there all the time, right inside, right in front before you enter the bank. So that's wonderful as well, right? So I think besides all the complicated details, just putting individuals, adults, human bodies in front of these targets, all right, can massively deter these bad guys, let's say, and then also just save lives, directly. So with that said, Chris, like what, as the expert on this, what is the solution? Can you give the nitty-gritty solution if you relay it out in front of a decision maker and they would snap their fingers and implement it? What is the actual solution, especially as it pertains to school shootings?
Well, it starts with behavioral threat assessments. And it's important to lay out that you're going to get everyone listening right now is going to say, oh, he's going to go down the threat assessment team and the more guns. Wrong. Behavioral threat assessments are understanding what to do when someone tells you they're going to do something bad. And I say bad just because that's what it is, evil. And have we talked about, this is my second one today, so have we talked about the 75% leakage yet? 75%, okay. All active shooters tell someone they're going to do something before they do it, 75% of them. But I'm here to tell you, I can't say this, but I'm going to, the last 10 have left manifestos, emails, or Instagram posts or the like, right? Whatever, pick your poison on social media and told people what they're going to do. So 10 for 10, that's 100%. 100% of those 10 have told someone they're going to be an active shooter. If someone tells you they're going to be an active shooter, you believe them. So who do you call? Well, we don't have a good hotline system, and it would be really redundant to say, well, you need a new 911. And yet they installed a new suicide prevention hotline, 988. Wonderful. 988 can solve so many problems that I didn't even know about till recently. It's been in since like the last year of the Trump administration or whatever. Doesn't matter the presidents. I'm just saying for how long it's been there. It's like bipartisan. We found something bipartisan. They can help you with health, finance, budget, you name it, pick your poison, sexual abuse, trauma, physical abuse, child neglect, suicide, whatever. They are equipped at 988 where I am not. And if you call 911, they might just send a report taker to take your report and find out that you feel sad. But this 988 can actually solve problems. So I am out here evangelizing 988 like daily because people see patterns in people that they're worried about and they don't know what to do. So there are systems out there. There's two of them, right? One is called Awarity and one is called Divista. They do different things, but Awarity is like you put information into different silos, like you call suicide prevention, call 911, call the gas company. You have these 3 different silos, and then a police officer comes out. Now you have 4 silos, and you say, hey, I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to go kill, that guy, Chris, the bald guy, Chris. And there's a report in each one of those, but the reports don't carry over. Awarity puts them all into a funnel and puts them in one place and then sends out alerts. Divista is more behavioral management, threat assessment for schools, under the radar of parents. It works great, and it actually tells you where your threats are coming from. Early intervention, number 1 thing. Number 2, monitor your children, monitor your children's friends, and monitor their friends. Follow them on social media, demand it. Find out what to do with those things that are suspect. And you don't need to overwhelm systems by saying, Johnny looks wrong walking down my driveway. No, there is no race, sex, color, creed to evil. It doesn't discriminate. If you see evil, talk about it. Number 3, learn that it's okay to talk about active shooters. When I was in school in the 70s, we used to hide under desks because the Russians were going to bomb us and ceiling tiles were going to fall. We called it duck and cover. 24, or however many, 1970 to today, there's a shooting where kids are hiding under desks. At what point are we going to understand that's not a good option? Because all you're doing is creating a hole in a desk and a hole in a body, and you're giving them a false sense of security. Run, hide, fight works if you have a place to run, a place to hide, and a training to fight. If not, you're kind of out of luck. So we have to address run, hide, fight to be more like stop, drop, and roll. We said we haven't killed the majority of kids in schools, right? 68 years. because we have smoke detectors that detect smoke and fire panels that extinguish, whether it's halon or water or whatever, sprinklers, and then dispatch the fire departments. So we came up with some sensors that say, okay, you got Awareness and Divista. That's awesome. Now you have the training. We're going to put a module in and we're going to do an assessment, find out where do you stand on prevention and where do you stand on what you're going to do if something goes wrong. Because we do fire drills, fire marshals and inspectors walk through every place before you build it, and then they walk through and inspect it once a year. Okay, well, now we do an active shooter inspection. Then you say, okay, I need early weapon detection, maybe an SOV, a signature of violence. You get a company like Omnalert. The false positive is like near zero, right? It says if it's a weapon, it's a weapon. If it's a phone, it's a phone. You're holding it, it's unholstered, it's telling you, boom, there's a firearm on premise that doesn't belong or it does belong. Here's an alert, please click. You know, what's the click? Is it a yes or is it a no? High priority, medium priority, low priority, whatever it is. Do you want to lock down? Yes or no? Seems simple. Now you intertwine that with some locking mechanisms that are automated through camera systems. So the camera is taking the human element out of it. Keep your guards outside. That's great. But the guards aren't going to see what a camera can see. A camera can tell that's a firearm or a cell phone. Most eyes can't. I know I'm blind as anything. I can't tell which is which. So Omnalert says, okay, firearm detected. Sends out the alert, gives you time. I've just given you time. I'm giving you the gift of time. After that, we lock doors. We immobilize some type of ballistic shield inside a room. And then if somebody starts shooting, you know, like Wing Shield is a mobile ballistic device. There's nothing like it. And these solutions, I'm telling you, there's a lot of others that are like it, but nothing that quite does what these do. And that's why I'm saying it. And then finally, Eagle, EAGL, gunshot detection. It doesn't listen for gunshots. It doesn't do noise. It does signatures of energy. It's an energy detection. So if the round comes out of a barrel or gets shot, it detects the change in the energy and it sends another alert to the responding police. Second floor, third door on the right, last gunshot fired. Here's the muzzle velocity, the caliber, the direction. I mean, what more could a police officer want? So if I were to go back and quiz you, Michael, and I'm not going to, but if I were to say, hey man, how long does an active shooter last? I don't remember. And you say 0 to 8 minutes, Chris. Cool. How long does it take police to get to an active shooter? 8 minutes. Because it takes a human being 5 minutes to call dispatch and get that call to go through. 4 minutes to realize they're in an active shooter, 1 minute to get that message. What if I just erased 5 minutes by putting technology out there? Now, this is just part of the solution, but I just bought you 5 free minutes, gave you the training, did the inspection. You have time to either lock down or evacuate, solve one problem at a time. And if you paid attention before, you're monitoring social media, and you know if somebody tells you they're going to do an evil deed, you believe them, and then you notify somebody. You've just reduced the possibility of having an active shooter exponentially, and now you're active shooter resistant as much as you are fire resistant. You have the detection and you have the alarm. And now you have a mechanism to report that to police. And if you want to get in the real nitty gritty, you add something like that doesn't exist from anyone except this one company. I think they're a French company, Axicom. Safe evacuation trail. Follow this route, and on your phone you follow the route, and it brings the shooter to a neutral location where people aren't, and it feeds them there by opening and shutting doors, and then gets you out by telling you go the exact other way, and then it guides police to where the shooter is. The technology is there. So when you put it in front of the people, I'm in, where am I today? I'm in Pennsylvania, and I'm in the 9th district, Congressman Muser. This guy listens. He gets it. And I'm not promoting anybody. I'm just telling you, like, the people that I talk to, this guy's eyes wide open. How do we fix this? How do we put this in every school? Because, you know, like I heard the commissioner of this county say today, if you've never had a shooting after implementing all this stuff, what a great way to waste money. I mean, how fantastic would that be? And you say, well, Chris, you know, do you have any situations that might be relevant as an example? Sure. Look at the Sentry shooting in Aurora, Colorado. Cool. The shooter bypassed 7 other movie theaters to get to the one that he went to shoot at. And they didn't have any signs out. The one that he chose had a sign that said no firearms allowed. There's your soft target. But to be respectful of all the victims there, which there were a lot, we want to fix that. So we honor their memory, not just say, oh, 5 more people died here or 15 people died there. We want to respect the families and say, listen, the sacrifice you made, I'm not willing to pay. But since you paid it, let me honor you and let me help you fix this. And that's it, man. That's where we're at. We need to populate, run, hide, fight. What does that mean? If you're going to run, where are you going to run? If you're going to hide, where are you going to hide? And if you're going to fight, who's going to fight for you? Because you're not going to fight with a crayon. Common sense, right? Newsflash. When we created this, it was like stop, drop, and roll. But stop, drop, and roll actually does what? Puts the fire out, right? Run, hide, fight doesn't stop the fire. So we need all these other things that give the police the tools. We shaved off 5 minutes. So instead of an 8-minute response, they're there in 3. Well, we know in Nashville, the shooter was in the parking lot for nearly 3 minutes. They could have interceded right there. And it's not like they could have, should have, would have. It's the solutions weren't exactly there. We're there. We're there. We have the capability. It's time to put it to use.
Yeah, you mentioned different layers of the onion, and so that makes a lot of sense. And you're able to expedite the response. So what about, and maybe touched on this and I didn't get it. What about not letting the shooter in the first place? So in other words, it's great to have software and technology when the shooter's inside the building, and where you could control where the shooter goes. You could lock down automatically all the doors, all that stuff. That's great. How do we stop? And is there a way to stop the shooter from getting in the building in the first place? In other words, what infrastructure can there be? You know, I watch and I watch a lot of these podcasts with these elite military individuals. Okay. I've seen footage of our best and brightest veterans who have set up forward operating bases in the middle of nowhere, okay, in the middle of a war, right? They put up walls, right? You and your fellow Marines put up walls. You're protecting your area. You create a green zone, a place that's safe and secure as much as you can in these hostile environments. You have sentries set up in the front. You have all these barriers and blockades, and you have all this other stuff, right? There's an actual standard operating procedure, okay? And I'm not an expert by any means, and I'm probably very naive when it comes to this stuff, and ignorant in this topic. So that's why I like to chat with people like you who are experts. So if that's possible, Chris, in a hostile wartime environment, okay, infrastructure-wise, how do we stop a bad guy, which is usually a teenager, I would imagine, from what I'm understanding? I don't know the statistics. Okay. So a teenager, this isn't a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret, or a Delta guy trying to infiltrate a school who's highly trained, right? This is usually a teenager, and who may have some mental problems, right? So they're not very well trained usually. So when you had that person assaulting a building like a school, how do we prevent this lowly trained bad guy who's the shooter from even entering one step into this green zone, let's call it, into this safe space called a school, right? How do we do that? That's what I'm most interested in, because I don't want even a bad guy to step into the office, let alone go past the office, harm everyone there, and enter where the 5-year-olds are located, right? So how do we do that? And is there a way to do that?
Absolutely. And part of the technology does that, right? So 41% of these incidents start outside. Guns are present outside. OmniAlert gives you I mean, think about that. You can eliminate 41 out of 100 shootings by just seeing a weapon on camera, notifies the sensors, locks the doors, keeps them out. You have the ballistic glass up there, or the film, say clear armor, that, never gets penetrated. by, you know, by their standards, and they'll tell you what they are, on the glass. The automatic doors are locked. You have somebody shooting through the glass. Sandy Hook and Nashville, both similar pictures of blown out glass. That films on it, they're not getting in. And if you are worried about a choke point or about a vulnerability point, you have that thing that I told you about, windshield. You employ that, you have a ballistic stop that they can't shoot or explode their way into. At no time in history has any domestic terrorists ever used military grade explosives. They used homemade explosives or some type of HME style. The only thing getting through a windshield, military grade explosives, maybe buy some of those. In other words, all the solution is there. You keep them out and, you know, you're drawing them somewhere else. But On Alert notifies you there's a problem in the parking lot before the problem becomes a problem. If a gun is detected, like at Michigan State, hey, there's somebody walking in with a pistol and a hood on. Maybe a good time to lock the doors. But you have to have you cannot walk the human element out of it. You have to do the training, and I don't do it. So that's why I'm not selling anything. I'm just telling you, you have to do the human element of, hey, by the way, lock the doors. You know, we saw in Uvalde, not exactly rocket science, but door wasn't locked. Failed lock, broken lock, whatever. In Texas, a couple months ago in Colleyville, door open, stranger walks in gymnasium, they arrest him, you know, going into the lunchroom. Wouldn't release if he had a gun or not. So, you know, what do you think he had? The moral of the story is all those things work, and they do work. And you just have to put them in a logical order and devote 5 years to a plan, a 5-year budget, a 5-year plan. It won't be painful. And there is no one magic pill.
Yeah. So two more things before we go, because I want to be cognizant of your time. Number one is you know, there's been school shootings for a long time now. There's been experts like yourself who are approaching the decision makers, which are, in my opinion, the politicians. If they want something done, they get it done. Usually they get things done, and you know, the things are not in the interest of the United States, unfortunately, but they get things done when they want to get things done. So if they want to allocate $100 billion to fortifying every single school here in the United States, they could. There's no shortage of funds here in this country, as we see. We have so many funds that we're actually in excess, shipping the funds elsewhere and outside the country, as everyone sees every day. So from your experience, because you're on the front line, you're trying to get people to do something, because Chris can only do so much. You can't go from school to school and fortify each school. So when you're approaching these politicians, why aren't they getting things done? I was going to ask you, are they interested, or do they pretend they're interested, not getting anything done?
A lot are very interested. And of course, the red tape that goes into it is, what's the amount of victims? What's the spend? What's the 5-year plan? Am I going to, you know, scare my constituents? And then when it happens, then what? You hold a police chief accountable? Get out of here.
Yeah. So just if you could say, if there's one, you know, what is preventing this from being accomplished? Is it the politicians? And you could blink twice if you need to. That would be yes.
No, not all. I think it's a lack. It's the human element. It's just a human element. It's where people come out with their point of view of, you know, look at Texas. We passed a bill that says school guards at every school, you know, peace officer or armed guards at every school. I just told you 40 minutes ago, the last 8 mass killings in schools, people were armed and did nothing. So here's the bottom line. People are refusing to look at the last 10 shootings, 100 shootings, 200, it doesn't matter. They're refusing to do a historical look back and say, here's something that went wrong. Here's a solution. Would this solution make a difference in this? Yes or no? And if you find that solution for 50 or more, you got a good answer. That's how I built the onion. Why is that not happening? Too much pushback from other people that say, you need good guys with guns against bad guy with guns, or no guns. And then you just get in a stalemate. So
final things for the Uvalde shooting, which was the elementary school. There were 19 students who lost their life, 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds. There were 2 teachers who lost their lives, 17 injuries. Is it true that there was approximately 400 armed police officers on the premises while the shooting was going on, and they all just waited in the hallway while kids were being killed.
376. For perspective, there were 198 Texans against 1,800 armed Mexican federales at the Alamo. They held them off for over, about 30 days. An 18-year-old held, what's that?
Go ahead.
Yeah. During Uvalde general location area, one 18-year-old held off 376 police officers for an hour and 17 minutes until the one Bortak guy went in. So how, what, when, where, why, I can't even wrap my brain around it. I've heard a lot of police say that were there, well, you weren't there and we've never been in a gunfight. And my obvious retort is, you know what? Neither was that 18-year-old.
Yeah. And so what is the official reason from the police chief or whoever the superior is there of those 376 officers that failed to act? What was their statement or whatever that they released of why these 376 armed adults failed to go in and save children?
No one knew who was in charge, basically.
Okay, so 376 supposedly trained adults that were armed, called police officers, went there, stood by while kids were being murdered, and they failed to act because no one told them. Their boss wasn't there, or their boss failed to tell them what to do. That's what I'm understanding.
I wish I could tell you I don't understand it. So
yeah. So
and
were there?
Here's the thing, to be clear, as a retired policeman,
Yeah,
376 people that don't belong to be police. I mean, that's really.
I 100% agree. So I'll say that, and because I'm not in the profession, I'm not in the world, in that world. So those individuals are cowards, from my perspective. I think everyone would agree. So 376 adults have failed to act.
One of those guys is the Bortak guy that ended up going on in, and I don't know how long it took him to get there, but if there's any bright, shiny light, he took fire and got shot. I think.
Yes, yeah, and I applaud him for that. That's the Border Patrol unit that came in, from my understanding, that's separate from the police officers. That's an actual job, just like being a firefighter. Your job is to run into the fire, save individual lives, even at the expense of your own life. So these are 375, let's say, police officers who stood there armed while they're standing in an elementary school, and there's one assailant in there, bad guy, and there's children. Okay, I'm not trained at all. I'm not a trained police officer. I never was, and I don't portray myself to be a hero or anything like that. There's absolutely no doubt, Chris, that I would definitely run towards the bad guy and try to save as many children as possible. And I'm not a trained officer, so I find it very hard to believe from non-law enforcement perspective of mine that you have over 370 trained police officers whom we used to, as citizens, look up to, fail to act on the job, which is their only job. Their job is not to build multi-million-dollar businesses as entrepreneurs. Their job is to go towards the threat. And you don't have even one who failed to do so would be a complete failure of that profession.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds. I mean, this is like a small army against one individual that's in there. And what happens? 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds died. Teachers died, and multiple, 17 were injured. So, that Uvalde shooting, I don't understand what happened there. It's hard to process, someone who's not an expert like you, and someone who's not in law enforcement, just as a regular citizen, as a father, how adults can stand there while children are being killed. And were there any repercussions? For everyone listening, this is the final thing, Chris. I appreciate your time. For those 375 who failed to act, were they fired? Were they prosecuted? Were they held accountable in any way?
I don't have the exact number. I know some were, very few number. And, this is the emotional side of me, the human, where I know my limitations. And I try not to speak about school shootings because of the kid factor, the child factor. But I don't know what went wrong there. I can't figure my brain won't even let me go there. I can't figure it out. I know that, you know, in honor of those 19 children and 2 females where, you know, one of them was related to one of the officers, the teacher, and they disarmed him and wouldn't let him go in. I mean, I don't know how bad that could get, but it got bad. And what we're doing right now is making sure that that doesn't happen again. That's all I can say. I mean, I can't look at that. I have to tell you, I hear you railing against it, and I agree with you, and I would too. But for me, it has to be productive. That we're going to. They need to be held accountable somehow, and I'm sure they will, and it won't be me that does it. But we're gonna stop another Uvalde if we start implementing these simple things. Painful onion, but simple to do.
So I appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing the expertise. And it's been great to talk to you and get a lot of insight into, you know, how these things happen and how to really approach it from a very objective perspective. So I appreciate that. Where can people find you? Companies, government, you know, individuals at the local level, and individuals who are interested, where can they find you and contact you and learn more?
Well, I'm about to really put this out there. Go to Google and just type in active shooter expert. I'm the top 8 returns. I mean, above the FBI, you know, not that I'm better than them. Just, I have so much media prominence and speaking power. Active shooter expert, you'll find Chris Grollnek, or you can type in activeshooterpreventionproject.com. That's the long form. And then maybe you throw it up in the bottom in the comments, ASPPpro.com. But LinkedIn, I have about 800,000 people. So it's disgusting the amount of reach I have there. But I post every day on something, safety tip, free tip, about a shooting, about good, about the bad, about the other. I'm not a paid commentator by any chance, other than when I speak, I'm paid to speak, but it's about my opinion. I won't compromise my integrity. So I look forward to hearing from you, seeing this, and talking to you on LinkedIn. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll put all your links down below, and let's continue to stay in touch.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it too. Bye-bye.